Live. I'm alive. Are you alive? It's me, Rose Kaz. Hi. See the little ticker? It says I'm live. Check, check. Microphone check, check, check. Eastern European, Czechoslovakian, Polish delight. It's me, Rose Kaz. Let me set my timer because this is a miniature podcast episode, y'all. This is actually the introduction for the next episode of my favorite things to talk about: money, sex, and politics. We are on season 3. I'm about to drop one of my favorite recordings I've ever got the opportunity to produce with not one, not two, but 3 different women besides this gal talking about technology and creative ways that we are using it to build better. And that's money, honey. It's kind of sexy. It's pretty political. Oh, I have a timer here. I guess I could follow that. Well, when this dings, turkey's done. Okay. Episode, I think we're on 3, season 3. I've got Suzame Tong, Addie Olson, and Rebecca Leslie Hurd all joining me on another live recording from May. It was back during Startup Week in Portland, which definitely ate my brain. If you were there, I bet it ate yours. It was awesome. There was so much programming, so much content, so many conversations, so much creativity, so much innovation. And it's taken me 3 months to finish the recording, which is 9 months less than it took me to get the last one up and out. But, slow and steady wins the race. So that's not what I'm here to talk about. You should definitely go check out that episode, which is going to be following these words. But I wanted to share a little bit about money from my perspective. Okay. A lot of people don't know this about me. In fact, very few people know this about me. Money, honey. I am a businesswoman. That means I trade my time for money and I help other people organize to do the same. Does that make us all businesswomen? Probably not. But commerce, the economy, how we trade information, how we trade our value and our worth, right? One of the things that I bet on during 2020, as I had a lot of opportunity to review how my business was going to continue to move and go forward. I was running a global digital media company, photo and video production. I was the boss, had a whole crew, and we were bouncing around globally. It was awesome. At least it looked like that on the gram. It was exhausting. But what had happened over the course of the 7 years that I was running that business is I had built up my equity. I had built up my line of credit. My business was flourishing. It was in the green. Now, the business structure may not always reflect the human structure, but it's a balance, right? Well, TLDR, during that economic crisis of a full global shutdown during COVID, which so many of us experienced in different ways, my personal business ethos was to figure out where the resources are. And I'm sitting before you today on the internet inside this podcast studio, which I'm setting up for Vita Co-working, BT Dubs. If you're wondering what's going on, that's what's going on here. I was like, where are the resources? This is what I'm good at doing. And I figured out how to get an SBA loan. I figured out how to get EIDL certification or approval for that loan as a business owner. My corporation had more rights and rules to follow to get the resources than my human person. Now that's some bullshit, I will say. And I'm saying it on the internet, on LinkedIn. Don't at me. In fact, at me and tell me how you're actually using your money and your equity and your resource to push us forward, because that's what this podcast is about and that's what building business for good is about. Okay. And in the process of pretty much betting the house, right? Now, I'm a single lady. I don't have any kids. I have plants and businesses, and I have a pet bird at this point. It's wild. I don't keep it caged, but it's living with me. I didn't choose it. It's chosen me. But I can play like that because I'm answering to myself. But I bet my credit, I bet my business credit to build the thing I've been building for the last 5 years. And that has me pretty constantly thinking to myself, what is the value of money, right? What is the reason, if I can move forward in this capitalistic process up the ladder, what's the point? Where are the tools and resources if I can't what are the point of those tools and resources if I can't actually share them, right? I can't take them with me. So that said, when I review my credit score, what that looks like right now, it's not as cute as it was 5 years ago because I bet the house. You see, no, I didn't lose the house. And I'm continuing to move forward in this sort of like inquisitive way of what money, resource, equity, and now let's go into different type of equity, right? Like balance. So as you get into this next episode, this is my timer right there. As you get into this next episode of the Money, Sex, and Politics podcast, have your own considerations of how you find value and resources and how you share them. But this is something that I've been wanting to share with people a little bit more from my perspective of what it means to be somebody who's doing business for good, what it means to be somebody who is showing up for this time in the world to do something differently. And for me, something that I do a lot of is business. And so I want to do business differently. And I've been actively trying to retrain that muscle since I was given the opportunity to look at the resources that my business had and see where I can put them into play from a social perspective, from a leadership perspective, from a changing the world perspective. And so, maybe that cost me 20, 30 points on my credit score. Uh, but I feel like it gave me a lot of humanity score for my own damn self. And I'm the only one that's really, doing the math on this that matters to me. And you should be for yourself the only one that matters. Of course, if you've got a family and kids and a mortgage, then you have different answering protocols, right? But I just needed to share a little bit of that personal part because I think it's always nice to hear a little on the real of the tea, right? I hope you enjoy the next episode of Money, Sex, and Politics. Suzame Tong, Addie Olson, and Rebecca Leslie Hurd are my incredible guests. Next drop, we will have another collaborative combo. And in between, in season 3, you'll hear little clips from me. Sincerely, yours, Rose Cass. All right, go out and change the world, why don't you? Ciao for now. Hi, everybody. Are you ready to get this party started? Thank you. And I'm Rose Cass. This is my 6th of these things this week. I am so glad to be in this room, not just because there's whiskey in it, there are all of you here. And this is incredible. And I think it's incredible because community, first and foremost, but also as an analog to digital converter, it's like really important that we remain human amidst all of the digital moments and sort of the robots' perceived takeovers. Many of you were at the talk this morning that I got to host with Scott Hanselman from Microsoft. It was a really great conversation about the ethics of AI being perhaps weighted dice and why that might be. Just the same consideration of like the timing of having a really sincere look at what our systems and structures are doing or not doing for us as the humans and what input and what we can do actually as we build better ways. I build business for good. That is the name of my company, Business for Good. Anybody know Oprah Winfrey? You think for myself? Yes. Anybody know she is? Okay. Does anybody know Oprah Winfrey from like the 80s? Like before she became syndicated? I'm a Chicago gal myself. So I really love the way that old school Oprah had like salon vibe, right? She kept it real cool before she was like, you get a car and you get a car. Syndication will do that. But the idea here today is that as we have this really timely conversation about participation in how we build the future, how we write it, how we code it, that it is really collaborative. So if you have a question, if you have an insight, please share. I hope I have one more phone on me so I can properly introduce these incredible women sitting beside me here today. Thank you all for being here. I would like for you to know some of Portland's finest creative technologists. And I've had the opportunity to sit and talk with each of you individually. And I'm like, man, this city has some really, really rad people in it. And so Suzame Tong, Suzame, from open source to startups to scale ups through IPO, she is a proven marketing leader with depth of experience in recreating brands, PR, social, and executive and employee communications for global B2B SaaS companies, an agent of change, a visionary thinker, crisis handler, and a voice of reason. Suzame is actively seeking to disrupt the role in AI. So, hello, industry disruptor. Welcome, Suzame. Addie Olson. I'm like so jazzed Addie is now in our fine city of roses because as soon as I met her, I was like, yes, girl, yes. I think met Addie and Katie at the same event and was like, okay, cool. And then quickly ran into Suzame and was like, all right, okay, we're putting the mega band together. And we already shared some time on a previous panel. I'll get to that in a minute. Addie is an AI specialist and data scientist. She's a consultant and is classically trained statistician, which I don't know how you do it. That shit is very hard. By the way, we're gonna have a little group moment every now and again when the train comes by. We're just gonna be like, hold it. We're gonna ride the train because it's gonna feel like we're all on the train. Here we go. And ride it. Okay, it's really fun. That's not even the worst one. The Amtrak wants it to be comfortable for the guests. The freight trains give no shits. So, just so you know, hold on to your hats. And back to Addie. She creates impactful AI solutions at the Federal Reserve at one point in her career, like the Fed. Okay. This boss worked at the Fed and at small businesses and works for nonprofits as well. So, welcome to the panel, Addie Olson and Rebecca Leslie Hurd. I have the privilege of meeting Rebecca when we worked together on a program on March 4th. We called it March 4th, like forward into new and envisioned leadership. Because when women talk about technology and how we built things or how we will build things, it's really inspiring for a lot of people, including our emerging leaders in college programs. Particularly, we were at the Macy College for Engineering and Computer Science at PSU. And Rebecca brings a lot of experience to our panel today. Rebecca is the head of software at Rain, and AI hardware and compilers. Rebecca is building Southwest tools that maximize human machine efficiency. She works at the edge of AI and neuroscience, developing brain inspired hardware that might just shift how we define intelligence, which I think is so cool, by the way, because this is where we can get like super into the weeds of this being like kind of nerdy, but it's also, hey, we all have brains. Some of us, maybe they're bigger or smaller, and sometimes we use more or less. But like the way our brains can compute information is kind of how the internet works or doesn't work. And I think that's so cool. And I'm Rose Cass, and I'm going to help make this conversation be cool and fun and not boring. And if you're really bored, you might want to ask yourself if you're boring, but you could also get a drink. The bar will remain open throughout the conversation. And we'll wrap up this part of our sort of little Oprah salon moment right around 3:15-ish. But again, salon style, if you have questions, raise your hand. We're not a big fan of mansplainers in this room, so if you could just not, that would be great. Ladies, shall we get started? Let's just start with how you even decided that you were going to pay attention to what AI is doing. Because for some of us, this is sooner or later. Some of us, I'm like, been just waiting for these bots to show up polite or just to get them out of here. So let's start with you, Suzanne, because I feel like you have been kind of tracking this for a while.
I am currently a consultant focused on helping companies operationalize AI from a leadership and cultural level. And I saw that firsthand when ChatGPT launched, and I was in the right place at the right time with a CEO whose cousin was an OpenAI executive. So we had a direct line into, um, what, is this really going to put us out of business? All those types of questions we could ask, or my CEO could ask directly of an open executive who ended up becoming our AI advisor. So he left the company and became our AI advisor and went on to become a highly in demand speaker. His name is Zach Cass. And with that opportunity, I got to ask a lot of my selfish questions and be extremely motivated to disrupt my own role, as well as I lived through the disruption of our own company, which was led in a very thoughtful, values based, and culture based way, which is what I really appreciated about going through that change. And I see headlines with Shopify and other companies that are not you know, going through it in necessarily as, at least from what I see from the outside, a thoughtful way that is inclusive. So that's why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing right now.
I also think it's really interesting because it was one of your early roles, like in marketing, right? And sort of the advance of technology in from just simply from a marketing perspective. Like you could say marketing's in this department over here on this side of the building and technology and IT and all of these. It's hard for them to not be completely intersecting throughout time, but specifically right now. And so I think the arch of your career is fascinating to have a closer look at because a lot of us, I think, consider our roles not being bothered by AI or that it won't affect it or why would I even be able to harness it? I think your career really indicates and shows that sort of intersection.
Well, I'll just say that specific to um, being a marketer and a communicator, working closely with HR, who HR, learning and development, communications leaders are all being tasked with rolling AI out, and those are often led by female leaders, and they often are under resourced and don't get the credit. So, and they don't have a map on how to do it, right? So, even more so than marketing, I think HR, which I love my HR friends, but they historically have been slow to adopt new technology. So there's a lot being put on their plate right now.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating from a standpoint of technology over the ages for a lot of folks, but most of us as women, I think we have either been told like we're not great at math or that we shouldn't participate in things that are more for the guys. Interestingly enough, I see like all the heads in the back row are going, and that often goes very parallel with right finance technology, and so it's not a surprise that the pipeline into both of those sectors does not have diversity. So just from that perspective, it's really great that we look at this from an intersectional lens. Rebecca, to you, I know you've been working in corporate and now as a leader. Like, how have you seen the arrival as AI as sort of like a surprise guest at the dinner table to maybe
Yeah.
not be the case?
A lot of people are familiar with sort of the chat GPT moment where like AI and the capabilities of these models came like to the forefront of everyone's attention. But there was another really big moment that happened in AI in like 2011. And that was when it's sort of the beginning of the deep learning era. That's when people figured out how to use this kind of architecture called GPUs, NVIDIA hardware, people familiar with that company, to run models well and faster. And that allowed us to scale what we're doing with machine learning. They could solve these more meaningful problems. So that was a really big moment. But ever since then, machine learning model development has been very locked in on NVIDIA hardware, right? It's very much been an evolution of that hardware platform and the way that it works. And that I think actually drives what the models look like, right? Models are developed to run well on NVIDIA hardware. NVIDIA develops hardware that runs the models well. We're not really breaking out and creating new paradigms in terms of what the models might look like or what the hardware might look like underneath. So, what I've spent the last 8 years of my career working on is different hardware architectures for accelerating machine learning. I worked at a company called Grok and then Cerebras and now Rain AI. And I really believe that like by innovating in that hardware space, we're going to be able to unlock new problems and develop different kinds of models that solve different problems or solve them better. But there's a lot in the way of that, right? There's a lot of entrenchment and in the system. So my role is really both helping the hardware team that's designing what should these architectures look like to be able to run models well, but then how do we get and those architectural innovations into the hands of end users, right? Actually being able to run their models on our hardware, then being able to easily try new things and run them on a diversity of hardware. So that's been a lot of what I've worked on. So I came kind of from an interesting AI through. It wasn't really a surprise in some ways, in that and came at it from being a hardware architecture nerd and wanting to be like in that space where like cool things were happening in hardware architecture. So I joined this like world of ML in 2017. So it's changed dramatically the kinds of models, their capabilities over that time. That part has been a big surprise. I think that ChatGPT was the first time like I actually ever used AI. I was just like building software that would run AI, but I wasn't really doing anything with it. And since then, I've been really then thinking about, well, what are we going to do with these models and how do we make sure that they serve the purposes that we want them to serve in humanity? How do we ensure that there's not just a diversity of models and hardware, but people who are using it? I fundamentally believe that if the set of people who are able to use these tools is going to dramatically impact like what gets built with these tools and ultimately what our society looks like in the presence of this technology.
I remember that panel that we had with the students at Massey College. You showed a picture. I think you were like 8 years old, and it was like I think you said something like it was no surprise I got into computer science and sort of the world of all that where you work, but I imagine that it's been an interesting ride on through that journey, like, especially in the what was it? In 2009, Roomba was technically AI's first visit into our homes, right? I know everyone's like, "That's just what cats write on videos and Instagram and TikTok." But, like, that little computer thing, like, we've had it in our lives more frequently than we realize. I'm just curious from within the different roles that you've had at companies, if you've how that has been. I know you said you recently started utilizing it, but have you seen it like, what has been the inside memo like, inside corporate memo on how it's
Yeah. I've never worked anywhere that had like top-down mandates in, and sometimes it's just people, right? The engineers are people, even people who are technical, and so it's very much everybody is figuring out how are these tools useful, where do they add value to my day or to my work? where do they not? And I think that's an area where there's a lot of room for us to figure out, both like at a company level and at a human level, like what can we do with these tools? How do we do it well? But that takes a lot of energy and learning. You can't just like in your spare time, like figure out how AI is going to accelerate you, because that itself takes a lot of work and intentionality. And so I think what you see is that people are kind of cobbling together bits and pieces, but not really in a uh, not like in a life-changing way yet, because they haven't had that time or energy to really comprehend what it could mean for them. And I think that's something that's really valuable about the work that Suzanne is doing, and what we could do, right, to actually carve out space for people, carve out roles for people to be thinking about uh, what would be meaningful.
Yes. Although if you just went to every program on AI at Startup Week, you could probably have like a master's in it because there's been like 4,000 things every day. So that's amazing. And I know Addie Olson has been at 385,000 of this.
So,
So Addie, talk to us a little bit. I mean, from your career at the Fed and through to going, how am I going to use these stats to actually like somehow do this, but not here?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I we were talking about like things that society says that girls are good at versus boys are good at. I was always a girl who was good at math. Like, wow, crazy. And was always told by usually males in my life that I should like capitalize on that and be like, "Oh, if you're good at this, you need to like do that with your life and like make money." And so I was like, "Oh, that sounds good." But I never really liked math. I was like, this seems kind of useless. But then I took a stats class in high school, and I was like, oh my gosh, math, but it now relates to the world that I live in, and like it's useful now in my mind. So I have like always known that like I love statistics, I love data and numbers, and have wanted to go down that track. And just like I've loved nerding out on that. And so in my education and stuff, just like really pursued that track heavily. And I took a like one machine learning class. I didn't even like know what it was when I signed up for it. Then I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's like models that are like way better than all the other models that I've been learning about. Like this is great. We need to use this stuff. And so I guess kind of further capitalized on that and like taking my career in that trajectory, also kind of mixing it or kind of like also turning it in the natural language processing way and being like, wow, we can use these really great, highly effective models, but we can use them on language as data instead of just numbers. And it's, the way that we think about the world and interact with the world is like through telling stories and talking to people and reading sentences or, watching short little videos where people talk to you for 30 seconds over and over again. And so just like out of just like pure creative interest was kind of just taken down that path and was always just like, yeah, this is where it is. So I feel like I've always kind of been in this world. And it wasn't really until like ChatGPT came around and I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, now people care about what I feel. Like, is this so fair? No, I try to explain to people or my parents or maybe those other like people in my life who are like, you need to capitalize on being good at numbers. And they're like, what do you do? Machine learning, data science. And so it never really clicked for people. So it was kind of for me an exciting thing that it was almost like mainstream now. But in my current role where I was at as a data scientist when I was at the Fed as an organization, they took a very just like risk averse view towards generative AI. And so it kind of went from like me as a data science working on a bunch of like a handful of really cool high level machine learning AI projects to basically all my work being shut down and like all of our resources being taken away. Like, you can think like Firewall, I can't get to ChatGPT, but they also like took away our access to Hugging Face. So it's like we couldn't really use
What's Hugging Face? So in case folks don't know.
company, but basically it's this like big consortium of open source resources, well, data sets, models, and tools, so that people that do research can like publish their models and resources and data, and other people can use it and go from there. So it's awesome, and it's like really trying to democratize this point in technology, which is maybe we'll touch on the interesting ways that people are really trying to commoditize this now. It seems almost inevitable, but Hugging Face is like one of those great players that's really still trying to make these resources available to anyone, just kind of as under like scientific domain.
It's kind of like Wikipedia's for nerds,
Kind of, yeah.
right?
machine learning nerds. It's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, and so I went from being like, "Oh my gosh, the world thinks what I do is cool," to like, "Okay, well now in my day-to-day job, I like can't do it anymore." And so my job basically switched from like developing and like writing code all day to kind of advocating and doing a lot of speaking and workshops and talking to leaders and talking to business groups about like what actually is going on in this technology. What does this mean? Where's the value? What are the risks? Like getting a lot of fear, a lot of feelings, and trying to like help manage that, figure out what's like base and what's not base. And like the amount of times I had to tell people that like we're building a model on-prem means that our data is not going to OpenAI. Like I had to repeat that phrase like so many times over and over and over again.
On-prem meaning you're not in the cloud.
Yeah,
You're
not on the
local
cloud. Like,
server.
we're running it on a server that sits here in the building. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, and so it to me was just kind of taking me away from that technical development and also just watching technology just race ahead, kind of outside this bubble I was in. I felt so drawn to, it was great being able to kind of advocate for the work and educate and make information accessible, like kind of inside my bubble. But I was like, wow, there's so much of the world and industry that's still out there. And I want to be part of it. I want to stay up to date with the pace of technology and be able to kind of like be in it and help organizations and people that have visions and ideas adopt this technology in ways that can actually help them. So I made the jump to my a new independent contracting life.
Yeah. So I know we saw a hand up there. 1 second, hand there. I'm gonna have you think of this question and get to yours, and then I want to break down some elemental keys because I hate acronyms. Okay. What's one everyday system or experience y'all wish that AI would rethink through a more human, more inclusive lens? Maybe it's rhetorical. Maybe we'll get to it. Maybe we won't. Okay. AI. Anyone? Does anybody know what AI stands for? I just want to make sure we're on art. Everybody? Artificial intelligence. Okay. NLPs. Natural language processors. Great. ML. Okay. Okay. Good. We're all cool. Because sometimes, like, depending on where we're at and the acronyms just be flying around, I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's get these on-prem, right?
It's
On-premise.
premises is like it's just a shortening, yeah.
SaaS? Anyone SaaS?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, SaaS. No. Scott Hanselman said SaaS. I was like, you are the oldest person I heard say SaaS, and I feel like I better say it more because I'm like Gen Alpha. No, I don't know how. I'm a vintage millennial. I think. Okay, so Shannon's hand and Kenny's hand. So Shannon, Kenny.
Well, I just had a follow-up because I had a question around input exhaustion. It seems like in the national realm right now, the conversation on those needing to get access to data because it exhausted all other data inputs. And so I'm like, is there a data input exhaustion? Is there a risk? I mean, it seems like he wanted data that was government based to extend his model. And is that something that we should be concerned about? And is an exhaustion?
That's such a great question. As yeah, it was really nice working at the Fed because you were just like very bipartisan and we're very like, you don't care about politics, even though, the news might tell you otherwise. But all that being said is like my experience working there is working with a lot of really highly confidential data about like people and their money and their loans and stuff. And so part of a huge frustration of working there was like even just as a person who works as a practitioner, getting access to the data sets I needed to do the projects that were assigned to me. So just to like say that like that process is very long and lengthy. And I think like for good reason, like there's a lot of like very stringent like policies and procedures in place, like get access to data, which assures me now as someone like just a regular person in the United States, maybe towards your point, but as a practitioner, I was always like frustrated. I'm like, man, this process could be so much more efficient if only they'd let me fix it and give me access to the data to do stuff. But yeah, input exhaustion, I think is obviously in this way being used to talk about like models only can learn and gain context around the model that or the data that it's trained on, and it can't really, it can generalize to the population that that sample as data represents. But if we want to make that population bigger, there needs to be more data and more input. So like as a concept, it's like, yeah, if you want your model to know more things, you're going to have to give it more data. Like, yes. So yes, that's a thing. But I think in this specific scenario, it's almost like trying to use like this sort of concept as like a way of like a means to an end rather than like but that's the thing is like what I think we're going to talk about today is like who is asking the prompts or asking the questions and then who's designing the solutions and who's paying for it all and what data are we collecting and what data are we not collecting, and so building in those considerations to build holistic and hopefully unbiased tools is
It also seems like that like there's not enough data or we need more is like a just we give us more access from Doge, like please. But also it's like, oh, we couldn't find any women. Oh, we couldn't find any women of color. Oh, like we don't have enough to base this off of, where it's like, did you like where's that ask coming from? Like and why, right? Um
When I think when we talk about using AI to do something, right? Like we have all this government data, we want to use AI to make the government more efficient. What's the objective? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? There has to be some much more specific, like, metric for what you're trying to accomplish to be able to create a solution and evaluate like the results you get from that solution. And like none of that seemed to be happening in that conversation. So I think that's something to be skeptical of and something to always keep in mind is like as a tool and, if you're giving, want to apply a model to your data, you need to be thinking about like, well, what am I trying to get out of it? To what end, right? And then think about the solution and what would be a meaningful result and evaluate the results you're getting. But well, I'll be overly political. I don't think they have a real objective around using AI to make the government more efficient.
what do you think, Susie?
Actually, let me pause first before I continue. Is it so cool to be able to lean back and put your elbow on a bar while your data panel? This is really cool. I'm also a lightweight drinker, so having a few sips of this is a high risk move for me. So when Rose and I were talking last week, I made the observation that women's accomplishments are being erased from history. So even dead women are a threat because their names are being removed from Arlington Cemetery. Right. So we're at this historic moment where we are in the midst of this incredible AI revolution. At the same time, women's accomplishments are being erased. And you think about that, data not being in what AI is being trained on in the future. And what is that scaling? Right. I also think about there's a recent Harvard business paper that aggregated the results of 18 studies with 140,000 respondents from 27 countries. And women, it found that across all those studies, women are 25% less likely to adopt Gen AI than men. So why? Because they feel concerned about the ethics, which completely understandable. They feel like they need instruction. So you think about society raising women who are polite and nice and waiting for their turn and being like, tell me what to do. And they're also concerned about having a sense of shame of like, I didn't do this. Like, this wasn't me. Like, what is this doing to my identity? Right. So you take the factors in of women disappearing from the public record, the bias that's already in the system, and the women being less likely to adopt. And that to me, it's like, this is the moment where we need to really think about how are we helping each other through this, because not everyone's learning the same way. There's no one size fits all for how you roll out AI. There's no one size fits all training for everybody. Like, really need to be conscious of the implications of just saying, well, you'll learn it. They'll pick it up. They'll, not going to give you any training. Just, do it yourself. And I found that when I've met with, individual, friends on a one-on-one basis and just getting that conversation going, it makes all the difference. But we need to figure out how to scale that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know how many of y'all have seen like the 404 redirect pages from like, women in history, women in STEM right now, looking over you, Sam, and what you've been doing at OHSU and the amazing like credentials of people in healthcare right now that are just like the page is gone, right? And I think that's terrible. This is not a time to just like let that go without some stern leaning in and figuring out how we can build systems that reflect the world we live in. Kenny had his hand up a little while ago. And so if you raise your hand or have something to say, just wait till I come over Oprah style so we can get you on the mic.
Thank you all. I think you may be answering this in this conversation now, but I'm really curious about the entrenchment and the biases that are in the models now. Is it just the data, or are the models, is the architecture of the model already leading us down a path that is hard for us to understand what it's leaving out, or what the decision path was that is causing us to exclude a different use case or a different kind of model?
I try to break it up into 3 columns. One is data bias, then development bias, then interaction bias. So I think you're trying to get at this development bias piece. Like, we know that data is biased. Like, that's nothing we're ever going to get around. But the development piece, there's a lot of factors that come in there, and kind of when designing algorithms or designing solutions, just like you were mentioning, like a lot of times we're designing things to maybe fit on the hardware that's going to run them the best. So like that's a bias, we're like biasing it towards the specific type of hardware. Maybe that is or isn't causing any disparate outcomes, but maybe we don't know. So I think what's super important is measurement, of measuring, of course, the bias in the data. And then kind of during the development, like, and especially on the evaluation side, like once we have built a solution, like how are we measuring and evaluating what sort of biases are coming out from it? And also critically thinking about like who is designing these solutions and who's like making the decisions. Again, like who's paying for this decision to be made, and how might the way that we design it, like maybe it needs to be done like super quick to meet some deadline, and like then what things are we gonna have to leave out, and how does that affect other people, or you know health in the world in general. So there's a lot that goes into that development bias piece there. And so I think it is about like awareness and measurement and like intentionality. And honestly, right now, there's not a ton of transparency that we're seeing in that space. We love like our open source models and like